Okay, so now we're recording. So good morning once again to everybody. We have with us Victoria Brown, ag teacher at Kutztown High School and advisor of Kutztown FFA. Victoria just very successfully led Kutztown FFA through a virtual banquet last week. And we've asked her to join us here to share out some of what she has learned through that experience, as well as some tips and best practices that she has for you. And hopefully you folks will have some questions to ask Victoria about the experience that herself and Kutztown FFA went through. So Victoria, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And I'm going to share my screen. I think I'm doing this. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? Yes. Okay, cool. I'm more used to Google Meet than I am to Zoom. Okay, so yes, I am Victoria Brown. This is my first year teaching, and I'm at Kutztown Area High School. And just this Friday, we hosted our virtual FFA banquet. So I'm going to share just some of what we went through that process and what that looked like for us. I know for a lot of people right now, they're trying to figure out how they're going to approach their banquet. So I just thought, you know, if I could share any insight, I will. So I will get started. One of the first things we really did was talk about our options. With my students, our banquet was supposed to be April 24th. So on March 13th, when we left school indefinitely, I told my officers, we're gonna hang in there. We'll wait until we have a better idea of what's going on. I'm not canceling anything. But as time went on and we realized we were not gonna be in school on April 24th, we got together as an officer team on Google Hangout and we discussed our options. I know right now, again, every chapter is different, every program's different. And I think what's really important is that anything you're doing right now is great for your students. I've seen a lot of advisors who have said, you know, we've worked too hard, we're gonna save it for the fall, different things like that. For us, you know, we had everything ready. We were still a month away, but everything was ready. And as we discussed, we said, you know what, we've put way too much time into this. We don't want to let it go to waste. We want to make it happen. So that was really the discussion I had with my students was, you know, we can try and save it for the fall, but if you want, we can try and do it now. So that was kind of the decision we came to. And my next step was making sure I had approval. So I did reach out to my administrators and my technology director. And a couple of the things that I think are really important to talk to them about, because you don't want to go through this whole process and then find out you're not allowed to share it. So one thing I was very clear with when speaking with them was that I wanted an option that we could share publicly. I didn't want to go to all this work, have my students go to all this work, and then not be able to share it with our community. So a couple of the thought processes that they went through was making sure that all of the students had signed photo release forms. I'm sure every school does that. So just making sure that you're legally allowed to publish those photos and videos of your students. Also making sure that you are not having issues with any copyrights. So my technology director wanted to make sure that if we were going to use music in the background, it was not copyrighted. So even if that's not an issue with your school, if you're going to be publishing it on YouTube or Facebook or anywhere like that, it can get flagged for copyright issues there. So just being aware of that. And I'll talk a little bit later about how we got around that. And then also making sure that however you are publishing and sharing it, again, is okay with your school district. So we initially thought about doing some type of live banquet with, you know, Zoom or Google Meet or something like that. But my technology director was very hesitant to have community members live with students. So that's how we came to the decision to have kind of like a movie, a recorded banquet. And he wanted to make sure that it was published by the school district. So I shared the file with him and he published it on our school district YouTube. So little things like that, just thinking about how you need to make sure you're checking those boxes before you even get started, I think is really important. Again, if you're going to put all this work into it, you want to make sure that it is approved by your district, something you can share. So ours, we were allowed to share publicly. And again, that was to me the most important thing. So just making sure that you have all of the administrators on your page, making sure everyone's okay with it, I think is a good place to start. And the last thing we thought through was planning. We made the decision to go virtual, I think the very beginning of April, and we knew that we still wanted to, if possible, publish the banquet on the night of our scheduled banquet, which was April 24th. So that gave us about 3 weeks, which personally was, in my opinion, the time that we needed. I think giving the students 2 weeks on their end to get the recording done, and then 1 week on your end for editing. So about 3 weeks is what I would estimate this takes. Depending on your chapter, you might be able to get it done more quickly, but you want to make sure you have time. So next we moved on to our script. Luckily for us, like I said, everything was already done. So really what we wanted to talk about was what needed changed. For us, we wanted to change as little as possible. We wanted this to seem like we were all still in the school cafeteria, eating a meal and having our banquet. So really, we only changed a few things. Does anything need to be cut? We cut out the part about please enjoy your meal and things like that. Just things that make sense. And also, what do we need to change? For this, it was really making sure that the students were thinking through the fact that instead of speaking live at a banquet, they were on a recording. So instead of saying, will so-and-so please come to the podium to receive their award, they said, I will now recognize this student. So just small changes like that that made it more realistic and acknowledged the fact that we were on a computer screen and not live. Again, for us, it was pretty easy because we already had everything done. It was just a matter of changing a few things. So we did 2 types of recording, and I will talk about both of them. The first we did was individual recording. So every student that had an award speech individually recorded themselves giving that speech. So the first thing I did once we made this decision and had approval was emailed all of my speakers and said, here's what I need you to do, here's how to do it. I gave them 2 weeks, which I think was realistic. If you can push your kids more and get it done quicker, more power to you. Mine did need a couple weeks to get comfortable with it and really get it done. So when I did send that out, I also sent them a video of myself to give them an idea of what to look for, and I gave them some tips. The first tip was to record horizontally. This one is really important. Not a lot of people think about it, but this is an example. This was one of our guidance counselors, and you can see she recorded vertically. I made it work. It's not a big deal. But as you can see, when you record vertically, you don't fill the whole screen. And when you publish everything, you want it to look as clean as possible. So in this case, it just doesn't look as nice. Not a big deal. And if you want it to be horizontal and they send you a vertical file, you have to zoom in really close to their face. So if you can get everyone to record horizontally, it makes a big difference. It's also important to make sure they have an appropriate environment. Obviously, this one can be tough depending on what your students are working with. I tried to encourage my students to make sure that they had a plain background, good lighting, they didn't have siblings running back and forth, making a lot of noise, things like that. So this picture gives you a pretty good idea of what we were looking for. Again, it really depended on what the students had access to. Obviously, I'm not going to tell them, you can't be sitting on a couch and have a lamp in the background if that's the only place they can record. One thing I would be aware of is recording outdoors. Some people, it definitely looks nice, but you have to think about how that's going to impact the audio. One of our guidance counselors did record outside and it looked wonderful, but it was just windy enough that it was really difficult to hear. So think through where you want students to record. If possible, ask them to have the family be quiet for a few minutes. I did have a student who had a sibling using inappropriate language in the background of her video. That made it very hard to edit. So again, because students are at home, we have to, work with what we get, but just having these guidelines really gives them an idea of what they can be doing to make this really high quality. And adding buffer time. This is one that makes editing much easier, but it's sometimes difficult in the moment. This is really just asking the students before you start speaking and when you are done, just smile at the camera for a few seconds. That gives you time on either side when you are doing the editing process to make sure that you're not cutting anything out. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. It gets a lot more difficult when you're recording with a group, but it's helpful in the editing process. And one more thing to think about is how they are recording. Depending on what your students have access to, they may have to record on their phones. Our school district is one-to-one with MacBooks, so it was really easy for my students to record on their computers. I think most computers have something called QuickTime Player. If you open that up, you can record a file just like this. I think that's the best option. It's much easier for students. No one has to hold their phone. They can look right at the computer. They can even have their script on the side if they'd like. And it's also much easier to send the file that way. I had a few students record on their phones, and then they had a lot of trouble getting that file to me. So as you're thinking through this process, if students can record on a computer, that makes it much easier to send the file. Just another little thing to think about. So we then did some group recording, and this definitely made things interesting. So you don't have to do this, but for us, we chose to do a group recording for our opening ceremonies, our officer installation, and for our closing ceremonies. It's very possible to have students record these parts individually and put them together. But for me, it was easier to edit, and I think a little bit more authentic to do it as a group. So we used Google Meet and recorded it just like John is recording the Zoom right now. And a couple things to think about as you go through that. Microphones. Students are getting better with this, but you want to make sure that everyone is muted while the main speaker is talking. Number one, so that you're not getting that audio in the background. But number two, because of the camera focus. I'm not quite sure how Zoom records, but on Google Meet, the only thing in the recording is this person speaking. So in this case, I would be the only thing on the recording. If you look at the picture, that's what it looks like. It's just the one person talking. So that's really important to think about as you're recording it, because if multiple people are talking at once, you can't guarantee who ends up on the camera. So this was a little bit interesting, but how we handled this was lots of pausing to make sure that the computer could catch up, but you also had to get the camera's attention before you spoke. If right now John started speaking, there would be enough of a delay that while he was talking, my face is still on the screen. So as we went through opening ceremonies, it was very awkward, but our vice president would say someone's part, and then that person would have to clap or snap, somehow get the camera's attention, pause, and then speak. So it did make the recording process pretty interesting, but if you do decide to record as a group, you have to keep in mind how that camera focuses and some of the glitches that come with it. Just something to think about. And you also have to, again, think about speaking all at once. So initially for FFA members, why are we here? And the salute to the flag, we decided to try and say it all at once. It does not work. There's just too much lag, too many glitches. It sounds awful, it looks awful. So there are a couple ways you can approach this. For FFA members, why are we here? We just had our president say it by himself. You can also put the words on the screen and have people say it at home. You can skip it altogether, completely up to you, but I would really caution against trying to have everyone say it at once. It just does not work. And the last thing that we had to think about was the gavel tap. My president did not have the gavel at home. I don't have a gavel at home, but we still wanted that audio. So I ended up using some kitchen tools and banging them on the table until I found one that sounded like a gavel. Just things to think about. Another thing to think about is your special guests. I think one thing that's actually really cool about the situation we're in right now is that most of us are at home on the couch. So it's possibly easier to get some special guests to appear in a virtual banquet than it would be to get them to drive to a physical banquet. So we did still include a lot of our administrators and staff. They gave out awards and just recorded themselves at home. You can also include sponsors, but it's important to think about if they're comfortable with it. So we did have a sponsor who was supposed to be coming to our banquet and speaking. And when I reached out, they just said, I appreciate it, but I'm not comfortable recording myself. Could you record yourself in my place? And I was fine with that. So just thinking about what people are comfortable with is important. The state and national officers, as I'm sure you're aware, have been awesome during this time. They have just been doing everything they can to keep the students involved and keep themselves out there. So if you're in Pennsylvania, please do reach out to Mr. Brammer. Erilyn was supposed to speak at our banquet and she did record herself speaking, so we really appreciated that. And the national officers are actually doing the same thing. I'll send out my link at the end, but if you look, they sent out like a Google form kind of thing a few weeks ago that you could sign up to have them do a live or recorded keynote or greeting or anything like that, which is super cool. The students, you know, for them, it's really exciting. All I had to do was fill out a form. But for the students, that's super cool because Mrs. Brown knows a national officer. So again, just taking advantage of this time that we're all stuck at home has actually been pretty beneficial. One thing I've also seen a lot of is just getting more people involved. So, you know, reach out to whoever, even if it's a celebrity, there's a chance they might respond, and that's cool for your kids. So just keep that in mind as you're planning those special guests. Another thing that we added, some additional content, was for me, we did some award slides. Because we were not physically at a banquet and didn't have the students walking forward to receive the awards, I wanted to make sure that we still showed their faces, showed the sponsors, things like that. So I did end up making a Google Slides, and this was the template, excuse me, that I used, and I used the same one for all of the awards, so they all look just like this. And when you have a Google Slides, you can download each slide as a JPEG, so an image, and then I put that into the movie. And for a lot of the kids, I emailed them and said, please send me a headshot. I don't know what platform you use for your grading. We use PowerSchool, and I was able to steal their school pictures from PowerSchool. That's also an option if they don't respond to you. And another thing we have was our senior slides. I know a lot of chapters do this differently, but our students, every year, they prepare senior slideshows for the Keystone degree recipients, and they get to present them at the end of the banquet. Our historian had already finished that and had it ready for the banquet, and she had it done in an iMovie. So she just sent me the file and I put that into our iMovie. You could obviously do it however you'd like, but that made it a little bit easier. And that gave her something that she could contribute on her side, which was nice. So again, we used iMovie for that. And the music, again, you want to make sure that it is not copyrighted. So if you know, I know a lot of kids want to play a certain song at the banquet. Unless you own the rights to that song, you have to be careful. So we chose the route of using royalty-free music. From what I could find, none of it is lyrical, but that's okay. So for a couple parts of our banquet, we had background music. I used Ben Sound. I was not familiar with it, but our music teacher pointed me in that direction. All you do, they have thousands of free music files that you can pick from. You just download it, and then they ask that at the end of whatever you're publishing, you put their website in the caption. So again, it avoids any copyright issues that you could have. And editing. I think this is the part that a lot of people do have questions about and trouble with. Luckily for me, I'm really familiar with iMovie. I used it a lot in college. It really depends on what you have access to and what you are comfortable with. So there are a lot of video editing platforms out there that are available. Again, for me, it was iMovie. And this gives you an idea of what it looks like. I'm sure it's a little bit overwhelming. But if you have questions at the end, I can open up my iMovie and give you a little bit more of an idea of how it works. But it's really just dragging and dropping things where you want them. And they have backgrounds and transitions and all sorts of things that you can use to make it more or less fancy. Personally, I think it is pretty user-friendly. There's just a few main things you need to know how to do. But for the most part, it's just dragging and dropping. Everything else they kind of help you out with. So you can edit the audio and things like that. You can make it different lengths of time. You can speed it up, all sorts of things. But again, that gives you an idea of what it looks like. I would recommend, if you're not familiar, just using the internet, find a tutorial. Usually they're really easy. They just walk you through some of the simple steps. Again, you can get really fancy with it, but if you just have those few main ideas of how things work, it's really helpful, and it's not too bad. It does take some time, and you want to make sure, one thing as you're editing, make sure that you triple check. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I did have a student who had some foul language in the background of her video, and I did not catch that until I was about to download it and send it to our technology director. So get a pair of fresh eyes, because after you've watched it 100 times, you probably won't notice things like that. And also spell check. iMovie does not have spell check. So for your captions and things like that, you have to watch closely, make sure you don't misspell any names or anything like that. So just really triple checking, asking someone else to watch it before you send it out, things like that. really help a lot. So again, check the audio, check the spelling. And finally, the sharing process. So we shared in a few different ways. The first was email. So all of our sponsors, our students, parents, faculty, things like that, on the evening of our scheduled banquet, I sent out a video and just said, thanks again, please enjoy the banquet. They really appreciated it. I know a lot of our sponsors did end up watching it, and that's great because again, they can see themselves being recognized. So it's just a good way to share. We also chose to share on social media. We have a chapter Facebook page, so we shared it there. The week leading up to it, we shared a lot of pictures and said, you know, don't forget to join us Friday night for the banquet, just to try and get some more people interested. And then finally, we had a live watch party. So this was another one that we had to make sure we were doing everything right, following school policy, because we are not allowed to have outside people in our Google Meets or Zooms or whatever. So the live watch party was only for students. We also had our administrators join us, and it was the night of the banquet as scheduled, which again, I thought was pretty cool. So we all got on a Google Meet, said hello, I shared my screen, and we watched the banquet together. Students were able to type in the chat and congratulate each other. Again, it was not obviously what we're used to with the banquet, but it did make it a little bit more authentic, a little bit more special for the students because they got to all watch it together. And it was also kind of a surprise. So I made the decision to not really involve my officers in this. If you've ever used iMovie, you know that you can only do it on one computer. So there was really no way to have multiple people working on this. So after everyone sent me their video, they had no idea what to expect. So it was fun to have that surprise for them. We also keep our awards a secret. So having it debut live, I think was, again, more authentic, more special for the kids. A lot of them sat on the couch with their whole family and watched it. So that live watch party was really fun and just gave it more of that banquet feel. So those are the 3 ways that we chose to share it. And it's still a YouTube link. Our district did allow us to make it public so that, again, we can share it with anyone. I know that was a lot. Are there any questions?
So if you do have questions for Victoria, feel free to unmute yourself. You can also use the raise hand icon and I can unmute you, or feel free to type them into the chat box.
And I will share a few things in the chat. The first one is the link to our actual banquet video. And then the second one, basically everything I just said, I have in a Google Doc. It's definitely a process, but for us, it was really worth it. Even to have, you know, our administrators on their couches in their t-shirts, they really enjoyed it. It was good for them to see the kids. So again, everyone right now, we're all in different situations. We all have something that's best for our students in different ways, but for us, this was a really good option.
Can I ask how many chapters on the call today have already had their banquet in one way, shape, or form? Or how have you handled your banquets? Okay, Leanna says not. Anyone else? No banquet? Anybody thinking of taking on a virtual banquet like this?
I can share a little bit what we're going to do here at Penn Manor. We toyed around with the idea of making the all-in-one video, but our officer team seemed to think that it would be better to do it over a period of time and short because our kids are out doing all kinds of stuff. And so we're going to kind of do a slow release over our various media and then tie it all together at the end to make like a YouTube video that, pulls it all together that kids can watch if they want to. But we're going to start May 1 releasing like different awards and so forth, just using pictures, no video. So that's kind of where we're going with it.
Great, Neil. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else sharing would like to share what your plans are for your chapter bank? A couple of you have typed in the chat box, hoping to do a picnic over the summer. Leanna is thinking of doing maybe a virtual banquet. That's great to hear. Again, Kelly's sharing their officers hoping to do something over the summer when life opens back up a little bit, maybe. Any specific questions for Victoria? Well, I will, Victoria will be included in the recap email that will get sent out following today's session, this morning's session. So at this time, if there is no virtual banquet specific questions, today's topical theme is animal science, and we do have roughly 30 minutes of scheduled time remaining. However, like Dr. Foster likes to say, this is not a hostage situation, so we don't have to keep you for the entire hour. But if there are any animal science instructional related questions that you'd like to throw out to the group, if you have a lesson coming up, a unit coming up, I know many districts have switched from enrichment and review to mandated graded instruction or some sort of assessment type for students actually completing the work. So I know we, as educators, we've had to switch gears in many districts to, okay, I'm not just sending out busy work, I'm sending out stuff to get kids learning new material perhaps. So is there anything coming up that anybody's struggling to come up with ideas for, how to deliver online? Anybody in search of a resource specifically tailored for a certain application that you'd like to post to the group and see if anybody has any solutions? Might I ask, has anybody accessed, since it's been released, has anybody accessed the repository of digital resources that the center has put out, and Tiffany Morey, our PhD student, has been collecting as they've been flying through cyberspace? Has anybody accessed that and or utilized any of those resources and have some feedback on how that went that they'd like to share out with the group?
I've accessed it. I haven't used anything that was there because what I'm using now was just as good.
Okay, thanks for sharing that, Marty. Anybody else use any of the resources in that repository yet?
Do you say that that's live right now? Was that an email sent?
Yeah, I believe it was part of an email that was sent out to the listserv. It should also be in the Tuesday News Blast emails. I can include the link. We had to switch it to a Google folder because we ran into some sharing issues. Sharing it through Office, our Penn State Office 365. So we just dumped it into a Google folder quick. And I can include the link to that folder in the recap email as well.
Okay. Is anybody else having trouble or being restricted in any way from their school district to use Zoom or Office something with their students? And we're currently being restricted from using any kind of video conferencing with students.
We have not been restricted, but we have been advised to be extremely careful. Like Victoria said, there's things going on in the background that you might not notice. We've been told we're still mandated reporters, so if we see something, we have to report.
Yeah.
I'll also share, Stephanie, Kelly Smithwells at Danville High School has been on a couple sessions, and their district also is, again, not restricting, but really advising and limiting live screen time. You're able to use Zoom, you're able to use Google Meet, and any of the other platforms. But again, they don't want you to be on camera. They don't want you to be showing, inside of your house. They don't want you to be seeing, again, inside students' houses. So that you can use Zoom, but they really don't want, teachers showing video from inside of their house. And another question that I'll kind of piggyback that on that Kelly has asked in a couple sessions, is anybody else struggling with getting students to engage with the online instruction that you're coordinating and providing? How are you holding students accountable? Do your districts have a policy? Did you come up with a policy, or what is your participation rate? Because I've heard, from Kelly and other teachers that, out of 40, 45 students, you might get 5 that are sporadically completing and participating in the work that you're assigning. So given that it's a tricky situation, are you using a carrot? Are you using a stick? Because a lot of districts have switched to pass fail versus an actual letter grade for assignments. What are you all doing? How are you overcoming that? Are you facing the same problem and struggle to get kids to do the work that you're putting time into preparing?
Well, I'll go first. This is Stephanie. Yeah, I'm having a lot of struggle getting students to participate. We actually, in our school district, are struggling with students who do not have internet. So I have to provide online resources as well as offline resources to students. So if the district has recorded them on the list that they don't have internet, we have to provide hard work to be shared on a thumb drive, which is picked up by a parent once a week. So as far as that goes, my work has yet to be shared with a student, even though I'm doing all the work to provide it, because it's being done by a third party. Somebody in the office is doing all this work for the kid. Additionally, teachers have been telling me that work from the kids are not successfully being brought back or shared to the thumb drive when it's given back. So they do all this work, and I don't know, I guess the kid gets it, but they aren't getting work back. It's really hard to do that. As far as anybody else who does have the access and internet, they are not. I only have less than half of kids that are actually participating. It's hard to communicate with them. They don't respond to email. I'm leery about using my home phone to call kids. I recently been told if you have an iPhone, you can block your number. I haven't tried it yet. But yeah, anyway, our district is doing pass no record. They don't want to use the term failure, but they're calling it pass no record. I feel like our district is trying to tell us that we have to prove ourselves that we are giving no record. We have to prove that we communicated with the kid multiple times and they're just not doing it. I don't know. But anyway, 65% is a pass, and then the rest is no record. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, and that's Stephanie. That's very similar to what I'm hearing from a lot of different teachers and districts. Another question that's been brought up that maybe somebody, because we've got some new faces on the call today, those that are still maybe giving assessments, how are you utilizing technology? What are you doing in order to validate that the student that's supposed to be completing an assessment, and I understand that assessment is taking on a whole lot of new forms nowadays, but how are you validating and verifying that the person that you're supposed to be assessing is actually the one that's doing the work?
John, that's a good question at this point. I don't know if we have so much trouble in ag classes with parents doing assignments for kids, but of course in other classes, sometimes that's a big problem. So you certainly never know. It could be a parent sitting there doing all the work for the kid or some other kid. At our school, week 1, teachers were like, oh, we had a lot of 8th graders cheating already. And I thought, oh, all right, well, I didn't see the 8th graders in my classes cheating. Then the next week I was like, oh, it's 9th graders. They're all, cheating from me, like turning in the same assignment. And plenty of teachers have said, could we at least teach kids how to cheat, like, with a little sense? When you all turn in the same assignment, it has somebody else's name on it still, etc. Maybe you want to change that. Yeah, you don't really know. We use Canvas here. I guess Penn State pushes Canvas, and so they feel like they should push it here since they paid for it. It's like the Cadillac of Google Classroom-ish, I guess. It probably does a lot of things I don't even know about. There is a way you could do some kind of code, and since this was the first I've given tests on Canvas personally, I was like, I don't know what this code is about. I don't feel like trying to email everybody a separate code, and then if their code doesn't work right, they have another excuse. So I just tried to do what I could. And I just believe, okay, I'm going to take that. This was yours, kind of a thing. Just try to believe the kids. And then of course, you probably don't put as much stock or, grade, like a higher amount of their grade from said tests or whatever. The question about activity from students, I would say for me personally, I thought the big mistake was the Department of Ed. I understand why they did it, but to start with week 1 or some school, I just heard from someone and they said the Reading School District is not counting anything until May 1st. Like the kids have done nothing or didn't have to do anything for 6 weeks, and now all of a sudden you're going to have them come back. I mean, that sounds like a train wreck and a half, and like who's going to come back? Like 10% of their kids or something will come back for those other 4 or 6 weeks or whatever, when they obviously in the past 6 weeks have felt like, hey, we're on summer break. So even here at my district, we had the 2 weeks, and then I thought, what do we need review and retention for? We have Christmas break, and it could be 2 weeks. We don't review for another 2 weeks when they get back because, oh, they forgot everything. So I thought the like, oh, let's do this period of time and tell them it's not mandatory was really a downfall. I felt like it would have been one thing for it not to be mandatory, but not to tell everybody it's not mandatory. It's almost one thing if it's like a rumor or something, but before we even as teachers knew, the superintendent here sent a letter to the parents. And I was like, how come I'm reading this on Facebook? Usually they're pretty good, even if it's a couple minutes before they tell the parents something, they'll tell us, through an email or something. And I was like, I had to like find this on Facebook, and it wasn't like directly to me. It was on a group about what's happening in our town. I'm like, so this is what's happening. And so, and that first week was optional for students and teachers. And I was like, oh, okay. And of course, kids could like make up things that they were missing from the third marking period. I didn't have one kid bother themselves, to try to pull their grade up. And I gave extra credit opportunities and things. Granted, they were like the different things FFA was doing, or I had like a social media challenge, etc. So I'm finding what is interesting is some of the kids who are participating and who even reached out during those 2 weeks were maybe kids that don't in person always participate, or complete their assignments. And now suddenly they're at home and they're like, oh, I'm kind of bored. Like what, oh, I should do the schoolwork. So sometimes it's surprising who is doing it and who you have to chase down. But I'd say this is the 4th week now for us or for the virtual instruction. Some kids that did come in week 1 doing the work, then they didn't do anything week 2 or 3. So it's a whole lot of chasing down kids via email and their parents and calling and leaving messages. And we have bi-weekly meetings anyway. We usually do them in person like once a month, but now they're bi-weekly, like grade level meetings. Okay, from all the different teachers, like who's not hearing from this person or that person. This is a small school district, so a lot of people kind of know everybody. So that helps. And then, so they'll say like, okay, well, if they're not doing anything for these 5 teachers, but this teacher says they heard from them, like, hey, can you reach out and say like, hey, by the way, when I've done some Google Meets, I've had kids kind of like stay behind. And I'll say, by the way, in the grade level meeting, your name came up. And when your name came up, multiple teachers said that you weren't doing anything, but you're showing up to my class and you've been doing my assignments, and that's good, but make sure you're getting in there and doing everybody else's. So it's been a lot of like teaching kids. I think some of it, in my opinion, about half of them lie that they don't understand. I think they really understand. It's just like an excuse. Let me say I don't understand where to find the assignments, or you're like, it's written like 5 different places, read some instructions, this is good. Come to the Google Meets, this is where we go over, these kinds of things, whatever. But now I'd say like week 1, it was about 50% or more. Like there's only 287 kids in the school. I think they said we have like a Google sheet shared throughout the district too. I think they said there was like 197 of them or something on the list week 1 that they, at least one teacher didn't hear from them. And now it's down to like 10 or 12%. So it has gotten better by hounding. We are 1-to-1. We went 1-to-1 last year. So I felt like personally, even the internet issue shouldn't have been that big a deal, because the school gave out hotspots last year to people who didn't have them. But then there's still people who, whatever, it came up that, oh, I don't have, access to internet. There was a kid, I drove a Chromebook to their house. And after I gave them a Chromebook with the charger, for the next 2 weeks, I got nothing. I was like, I even brought it like out to your house. Like drove an hour round trip to get you this. Now you have done absolutely nothing. So that he's like part of the VOTEC, so she comes from a different school, and her own school was like, she shouldn't need your Chromebook. We already gave her a laptop. I'm like, I don't know. I just, took it out. So it didn't matter what you did. Some kids just have all the excuses. So.
Yeah, like Amy mentioned, what we've been hearing from different teachers and schools is they have very few students actually participating in assignments and schoolwork, and it's not necessarily even the students that are participating, they're not necessarily participating regularly. It's still scattered. Yeah, and so I don't know. I kind of feel as though a lot of it is that the students, and to some regard parents, understand that while it is, quote, required work now, that I think word has gotten out that overall Department of Education, school districts are really, really, really going to and have to be lax with holding kids accountable from 2-3 weeks ago to the rest of this school year. So yeah, I don't know. I was just really curious to see. Then there's situations like Victoria at Kutztown where and Amy that they're taking daily attendance and encouraging daily and regularly scheduled face-to-face interaction with the students. And I think that's probably the key. Is I think when the students have lost connection to their teachers, to their classes, to the school, they really don't feel that obligation to do the work. But if it's, Victoria is still seeing students every day, that makes kids feel a little bit more compelled to do the work that they're being asked to do by that person. So yeah, I don't know. I know that it's come up in a couple other sessions, so I thought I'd ask this group again. And I will pass along the commentary and suggestions and notes given by the group. Okay, we've got a little bit under 15 more minutes. Is there any other business that anybody would like to share, ask, before we kind of adjourn here?
So something that we did was actually at our district, there was actually my suggestion, is we developed a rubric. So for grading in terms of the end of the marking period. So instead of being pass, fail, we are exemplary, proficient, emerging, and novice. And so that is kind of building in that expectation that you definitely need to do work. I think the biggest issue is that the parents are too proud to put their kids' name on the no internet list. So, of course, we're close to State College. So a lot of our parents work at Penn State, and I received an email yesterday, when I contact these kids. Why aren't they doing their work? Well, you're hearing their response. You have several kids on the same hotspot, and they could have to reset that every week. And so they're running out of time to do all the work. And then the one yesterday is you have parents at home doing payroll for Penn State. And I'm not exactly sure how payroll works, but there's no time for their kids to get on the internet, or the times are kind of odd. And so I think also there's some pride involved. I think people are too embarrassed to say, I can't afford internet. I know when I have the best internet package I can have, and it's $110 a month. Well, that's, I guess for a lot of families, it's a struggle. But I think as a culture, I'm very disappointed with parents in general. I think that if your child needs internet or your child needs food, that should be your number one priority. But for some reason, that is no longer the case in our culture. But that's just my personal beliefs. And I think we're depending on too much of the schools, too much on the teachers, and it's going insane. I had a parent who, her kids show animals. She's going off on me because I want her kid to do her weekly grow board assignment on AET. You can enter AET with a cell phone, for God's sake. It is our management network system. The only kid that really can't use AET is a kid who doesn't have a cell phone, or their parents don't have a cell phone. So I think a lot of people are just trying to make up excuses not to do work. But the good news is we're all getting paid, so I do what I'm told to do because I like getting a paycheck, and no one can complain that we're not, we're meeting the requirements so that the taxpayer knows that we're actually trying. So I think that's my piece in this all. But it is really crazy.
Very well put, Todd. Very well put. Is that rubric something that you would be able to or willing to share out?
Yeah, I'll have to look through the emails and find it. But because we have, which I actually find these to be extremely good. We have, instead of having faculty meetings, we're having, so the way our school does it, they have steering committee meetings, which are all the department heads. They meet with administration and superintendents. And then the next day, we have department meetings, and they go through everything they talked about in those meetings, but then we get the opportunity to bring up new concerns. And then those concerns go to the administration next week. And I really think it's helped with communication. I think personally that, our school has excellent communication. We're doing some really cool and creative things like Adopt a Senior. That was a huge success, where we created this Facebook page where any senior who wanted to be a part of this, your parents posted your pictures on Facebook, and teachers adopt these kids and they take them gifts or whatever. They make arrangements with the parents to drop them off on their doorstep. And actually, there's a shortage of students because I wanted to adopt one and there are no students to adopt. So it's pretty exciting to see that the community doing something really cool like that.
Absolutely. That's very neat. Thanks for sharing that, Todd. Good to see that you were without a student to adopt, but good to see that everybody else pitched in there and took care of them all. So that's excellent.
Is anybody using Dairy Leaders of Tomorrow during this time?
I am. I love it. But having a lot of technology issues with it. But Brittany Snyder is amazing. And so if you email her, she'll work through it. I think the biggest issue, like for our district, is we have to approve all the videos. And even though I go through and I've been teaching it for years, for some reason there keeps on being a video that I forgot to approve, but the kids email me and I go in and approve it. But, I think the reality is that in a sense, even though we all complain about this, this is really a wonderful learning opportunity for all of us. It's going to make us all better teachers. And I think, if we're forced to do a modified schedule in the fall or do online in the fall, I think we're going to have the toolkits that we need to make that all happen. So,
I just had this thought. I said this might be a way for a school district to launch into a 4-day week and a 1 day at home. so they can reduce their bills at the school. Just a thought.
Well, and that's a great comment, Stephanie, because they've done that in Florida at different times to help with different budget issues, and it really does save a lot of money. The only thing that scares me about this time is our district's going to look, are they, secretively looking at ways to reduce staff and things like that, which of course, that is scary, especially in small districts where you're low on the totem pole. My biggest complaint has been special education teachers, is I don't think that they're doing enough. They don't have near the workload that the rest of us have. I mean, I teach 130 students. I know there are people that teach 160 a day, and yet you reach out to these people, and for some reason, they think their only responsibility is doing IEPs, and they're not helping their students like they should be, and that kind of upsets me. The paras seem to be doing a decent job. If I connect the kid with the right para, we also have some support, like study hall teachers. They want to be part of it because they're getting paid, and if I get the right kid with her, she'll also support. But it is a management nightmare. I mean, trying to keep track of 130 kids and all their lack of work, which is being graded, is really quite a struggle.
Yeah, I took my dog to the vet this morning. He said, "Oh, are you on summer vacation?" I said, "What are you talking about? I'm working 24 hours a day around the clock." I said, "No, this is at this point a lot more work than being in person." He's like, "Oh, okay." Yeah, I asked about Dairy Leaders of Tomorrow because I sent Brittany a message like 2 weeks ago. I'd never heard anything back from her. So
probably the day you sent the email was the day they're getting ready to go over to a new web page provider, and they were having some internet problems because I had the same issue, and I emailed her and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you were one of those emails that must have gotten lost in the shuffle of things." So Brittany is absolutely amazing. I mean, if you do not hear from her and you email her back, she will get in touch with you.
okay.
Just a quick question. Victoria, you mentioned that you have daily attendance. How does that work? Like, how does that work? Do you follow the student's schedule and you're only on for expecting that student to be on with you for that hour of their normal schedule?
So we like, my school district was kind of way ahead of this. Like weeks before we shut down, we were told like we're going to be out of school. So they were really on the ball, which has been nice. So what we do, they want to make sure that kids who are working or have parents working or whatever don't fall through the cracks. So by 11:59 every night, the students have to log into their homeroom on Canvas and take attendance. The face-to-face, nothing we do face-to-face is allowed to be required. So for the teachers, it's required, but the students are not required to do it. The one way they've really kept up with things is that our principal has just asked us, if you're not hearing from a kid, email me, and he's just been calling every day to find out what's going on. So, I mean, we still have some that aren't doing their work, but we've had really good attendance.
Okay.
And that's good to hear that the administrator is willing to accept the burden of, tracking those students down. Not, I know in some cases it is falling to you, the teachers, to figure out what's going on with a student. So if you're lucky enough to have an administrator that's willing to take that on, fantastic.
That being said, I do know we use Schoology. I do know that in Schoology, you can, as a teacher, look to see if a student logged into your course daily. But you would have to do that daily to see if a kid logged in. You can also see, I look at it to see if they actually logged in at all and they're just ignoring my course, because you can see that they visited other courses or that they logged in yesterday but never touched your course. I don't know if anybody uses that. It's called analytics. It's on the left hand side as an option in Schoology. but we're not required to take attendance with it. I just use it.
Well, the Department of Ed sent out a letter to administrators last week and told them they're only counting attendance up through March 13th. But of course, nobody really knows, especially with reporting for different things through vocational education, you know, what's that going to mean, credit hours, etc. But that's what they've said anyway. Our district does the attendance through Canvas. Again, I can go in and see, but I'm not looking every day personally because the attendance secretary looks at that. And then, so again, they do the same kind of deal. They look to see, is the kid not logging into anything, or are they just logging into at least one class a day? So it's, again, not that they don't know how, they're just picking and choosing. Or like some kids will see, oh, 5-point assignment, I'll do that. But if there's a 50-point assignment, that's probably gonna take some time. I'm not gonna do that, you know? So you can see, again, it's not that the kid doesn't know how to use the system. They're just only picking and choosing what they think is gonna take the least amount of time.
So Victoria just added a really intriguing comment, and Leanna is also, is, you know, what we've been hearing is, or what I've been hearing through these Zooms, a lot of districts are actually going to cash in unused snow days and stuff and wrap up the school year as early as possible. But Kutztown, it looks like, and other schools are tacking on to the end of the year. That's interesting. And that will all be done virtually, I take it.
So at Rockwood, they decided that students are done May 22nd. We're on project-based learning right now. So students are done May 22nd. The seniors graduate June 4th, but teachers aren't done until June 15th. So from May 22nd till June 15th, we're not sure what we're supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be professional development. Like for the tech ed teacher and I, we left during the middle of projects, you know, so I have 15 small gas engines torn apart in my room, and he has the whole welding shop that needs cleaned up, and all the kids do that for us at the end of the year. So we'll probably be in there putting engines back together and stuff like that. But that's our plan, I guess.
So Leanna, for the rest of your faculty, is your district providing the professional development, or are you supposed to seek it out on your own, or how is that, or have they outlined how they hope that to work?
At this point, I don't know that they know. I'm sure department heads know, but for some reason in our school district, things are like hush hush about stuff. So our department heads will know things, and then they'll tell us we know things, but we're not allowed to tell you. So that, I think they probably know, but they're just not letting us know yet. I don't know. It's going to be a weird situation if we have to all come up with our own professional development for that amount of time. I mean, that's a long period of time to do that.
Well, the reason I asked that follow-up is because, you know, obviously we at the center are doing some long-range planning. We don't tend to do these daily sessions, you know, much past the end of May here, when many schools are going to be wrapped up, but we are kind of looking ahead to the summer as far as what we can do, again, specifically targeting supporting teachers with online instruction, again, with all this rumoring and speculation about you know, perhaps a delayed in-person fall start for schools, starting the school year off online and until things really clear up. And we've also heard about the potential of rolling phases of school closure as the virus flares up again, entering into flu season. Again, we're not at liberty or in any position to speculate or say with any certainty that we think that online instruction will continue into next year. However, there's been a lot of discussion about the potential for this to spill over into next academic year in one way, shape, or form, and that online instruction is not something that's going to go away. So if there's anything specific that we can, and, and part of why I asked was if there's a potential for many other schools to do something similar to Rockwood, perhaps that helps us plan maybe our window of when we offer the most. If teachers are going to have this window of time potentially specifically designated to do individual professional development. So that's why I asked.
Yeah, Jonathan, I just had a question I was thought about. I get summer days. We have 20 summer days, and it's split up. The summer is basically split because it's 20 days for each physical contract. So for example, if I used up 15 days last August or July and August, I have 5 days left to do this June. I don't even know if I'm allowed back in the building in June yet. So my worry is I won't even be able to record and utilize my last 5 days. If I don't record and utilize them, I don't get paid for them. So I don't know, I'm thinking maybe if there's a online development from you that I could work on and record those days in June, that would be great. That's just my thoughts. I don't even know if the school will accept that, but I was planning on asking my administrator this week what I could do about that. I mean, how am I going to get paid, or how can I record? Because it's on a timesheet. It's not, I don't get it automatically unless I fill out a timesheet. But I have 5 to 7 days left for June on this contract.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, Stephanie. So if you could help us out a little bit and talk that over with your administration, and then you can do it privately offline on email. Just let me know what they say to that, and again, we could explore that as another viable option for teachers across the state, because I have a feeling that you're not going to be alone in that situation of having summer days that you're not even allowed to be in a school necessarily to utilize. So if you could help us gauge, what administrators are willing to flex on, again, to help us hone in and plan our professional development offerings throughout the summer months, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, just in context, the reason I would leave 5 to 7 days for June is because I calculate the hours spent at Penn State, and Penn State Activities Week is canceled. I would also calculate the hours where I would go to the regional, we have a regional ag teachers meeting, and that Ron supports, we have a day meeting, so I calculate that. But anyway, so those days in June that I normally do or meet with officers, I don't even know if I'll be able to attend any of those. So obviously Penn State took up 5 days of needed 5 days to calculate hours, all the time we spend with students at Penn State. So.
Absolutely. So Stephanie, anybody on the call for that matter, the more input we get from teachers, the better the center can, craft a plan to support you. So please let us know. Reach out at any time, Beth, myself, or any of the faculty. Let us know how we can help you, because that's what we're here to do. So Leanna brought up a great point that I'd like to share to everybody. Carol Fay will be here Friday talking about SAE and AET. And I know that doing virtual SAE visits is a topic that Carol is going to cover and provide some best practices and feedback and tips on how to do effectively. So I'm not sure, I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure what she's planning, if she's planning to cover the same stuff in both sessions on Friday, or if she's going to do one in the morning and something else in the afternoon. But if you could hop on either one of those, Carol will be, the spotlight facilitator on Friday. covering everything SAE and AET to help you out during this online instructional period. Okay, well, we have run well over our hour of a lot of time. Great discussion. Thank you all for joining and contributing to it. I will be sending a recap email out momentarily with the text dialogue, as well as I'll just pull out Victoria's links and highlight them in the email specifically so you can check out Kutztown's virtual banquet that they've successfully pulled off. Okay, you're free to log off at any time. Thanks for joining. Hope to see you again either this afternoon or a little bit further down the road here this week.
Thanks, John.
everybody. You
Thank
bet.
you.